Hi, this is Margaret Maloney, and welcome to the Dhamma podcast. Together, we will consider life, death, and impermanence. Because in between birth and death, we lose things. Not just our glasses and our keys. We lose identities, relationships, ideas, and more. But what we can gain right now is facing this together, and we will gain freedom, peace, and progress on our path. Hi, everyone. Today, I have the great honor of speaking with Terry Tucker, and I'm not going to say too much because I feel that no one is going to give a better introduction to Terry Tucker than Terry Tucker. So Terry, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to talking to you. I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version of my background. Born and raised in Chicago, oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall. And I played basketball in college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. When I graduated, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available. And, I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International. Unfortunately, ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. I guess I'll give you a quick synopsis of it. I was in marketing with Wendy's. I became a hospital administrator for a number of years. Then I did a big pivot and I became a police officer, and I worked undercover narcotics. I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. Then I started my own school security consulting business. I've been a girls' high school basketball coach, a motivational speaker. Last year I became an author, but for the last almost 10 years now, I've been battling this very rare form and more than likely deadly form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
I'm so sorry that you're not proud of your daughter. Let me just start with that.
Yeah, it's really upsetting.
It is. We'll have to stop this conversation right now. So gosh, what a nice full life with all different kinds of experiences. Also, everyone, even though you're listening to this, Terry and I are meeting on Zoom and we see each other. And no, you cannot tell that he is 6'8", any more than I guess you can tell hardly anything about anyone on Zoom these days. Mm-hmm. But what another thing that strikes me, this is off topic, but I'm going to say it anyway, is how do you act as an undercover police officer when you're 6'8"? Because I think once somebody sees you, they mark you. I mean, they remember you.
That's a great question. And I get that a lot. And I guess my response to that is that industry, and like it or not, it is an industry, is motivated by greed. And as long as you have money, somebody's going to, you'll find somebody to sell you drugs. And, some of it you got to role play. I remember one time I was working the night shift and one of the day shift people called and said, this was Cincinnati, Ohio. Said, we have these kids that want to come down from Dayton and sell you drugs. Will you buy from them? I'm like, yeah, sure, I will. I posed as a professor of metallurgy for the University of Cincinnati. I met these kids in a park and bought drugs for them. And I'm like, the only thing I know about metal is that, you leave it out in the rain and it rusts. That was my extent of metallurgy. So thank God they didn't ask me any questions or anything like that. But, you do a little bit of acting, you have a little fun with it, but it's a very dangerous job.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine. And so in this very full life that you've had, and the reason that we're talking to you today on season 2 of the Dhamma podcast is, this season we're talking about deaths, not necessarily the big death, although that's the thing we can entertain as well, but really like the deaths of things that happen to us in our lives. And so in this full life of experiences that you've had, where you've had lots of pivots, I suspect that there are times when things didn't go the way you thought they were going to go.
Yeah, especially, if you kind of look at my resume, my first 2 jobs were in the business world. And then I did that pivot to law enforcement. Well, I felt my purpose was always to be in law enforcement. my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression, and when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It wasn't a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the knock on the door, or actually he was too young, but the stories my grandmother told about the knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. And when I expressed interest in going to law enforcement, my dad was like, oh, no. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live in the suburbs and have a great life. But that was the life my dad wanted me to live. And so when I got out of college, I had a choice. I could say, hey, Dad, the heck with you. I'm going to go blaze my own trail and follow my dreams. Or which is exactly what I did, out of deference and love for my dad, I'm like, okay, I'll go into business. I know you're sick. I know you are dying. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my dad passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. So, I never expected my life to unfold that way, but it certainly did. And, I remember one day I was helping my dad dry what little hair he had left from this chemotherapy. And he held out his hand like he wanted to shake my hand. And it's like, Dad, this is kind of weird. So I shook his hands, and in the palm of his hand was $100 bill. And I'm like, what is this for? He's like, that's for, taking care of me and stuff like that. And I threw it back at him. I looked at him. I'm like, Dad, you made me feel like a prostitute. It's like, look, everything you and
that's
Mom
a perfect analogy.
It is, everything you and Mom did for me and my brothers, really, you don't think I'm going to give back to you when you need me the most? Don't ever do that to me again. I don't want to feel that cheap. So, it was just kind of one of those things of, sometimes the child becomes the parent. And in that case, I kind of think that's what happened.
I think very frequently, if our parents live to be elders, we do become the parent in one way or another. Definitely. And in that scenario, I'm just envisioning your father coming from a certain generation of perhaps maybe not being overly demonstrative, was trying to find his way, right, to express his gratitude. But to you and I, that wasn't the right way, but at least it was a way, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a way.
Yeah.
So I guess after your father died, you went into law enforcement, and I don't know how that process went or how long it took for you to make that switch after he passed. Maybe you can tell us about that a little bit.
Sure. So I was a 37-year-old rookie policeman, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. And my wife and I had gotten married, and we were in Santa Barbara, California, and I just happened to see a circular that came from Santa Barbara City College that said, if you take this course, you can apply to be a reserve police officer with any agency within the state. And, my wife had married me when I was a kind of suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. So one night at dinner, it's kind of like, hey, hon, I'd like to do this. And my wife was incredibly supportive. And I would work all week in my job. Friday night, I would get off work, put on a uniform, go to roll call, and work all night as a policeman, and come home Saturday morning exhausted. But my wife was like, you had this big grin on your face, and I knew you had found your purpose, So when we moved to Cincinnati after our daughter was born, I was like, I'd like to do this full time. And that's how I got into it.
So I think that in that scenario, of course, your wife being, lovely and supportive, but I think that she and you together were able to see this change coming. First of all, it seems that it was part of you. It was who you always were, and you put it away to make others happy. And then when it felt like the right time in your life, you brought it back into your life on the weekends. But I would think at that point, when your wife saw your joy at doing this work, I would imagine she began to see that change was coming.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not so sure. I think as you get to a certain point in your life, and maybe I shouldn't do that. I sort of joke that I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than most of my constituents, my colleagues that I was with, doing that. But it was right. It was what I was supposed to do. It was the reason that I feel God put me on the face of this earth. So it was a natural progression for me. But, from a family point of view, it's one thing to go out and do it when the family sits at home and wonders. And it took a little while for my wife to kind of be able to sleep at night, because I worked nights my entire police career, and she's sleeping and I'm out getting shot at and doing all kinds of goofy stuff. So
she goes through this process and you go through this process together of, here's how one of the ways in which we used to make income together. And now I'm no longer this suit and tie guy. Now I'm this uniform guy. And the level of risk of my job has changed. And how do you navigate that together, and like in your own mind? And then how do you discuss that together, this kind of change?
Yeah, I mean, we knew the risks. Cincinnati usually has single person cars, and in certain areas of the city that are a little more violent, for lack of a better word, they have a 2-person car. Well, I was one of the 2-person cars. Myself and one of my classmates from the police academy ran probably one of the worst areas in the city. And, she knew that. I mean, she knew that we didn't get the auto accidents and stuff like that. We got the gun runs and the drug runs and the fight runs and all the shootings and all that kind of stuff. But she also knew who my partner was. And we were very good at, we had an agreement that's like, I don't care what the run is. If the hair on the back of our neck goes up, if one of us says, I don't care if we're going to a noise run to tell somebody to turn their television down, if the hair on the back of your neck goes up, we're going to pay attention to that. We're not going to dismiss that. We're going to sort of embrace the fear, because fear is there for us to keep us alive. And we did that. But we also knew that, I buried several people that I rode in a car with, that died in the line of duty. And that's always a hard thing to do. And it certainly reminds you of the danger of that job.
Yeah. And, you talked about the stories of your grandfather and the knock on the door. Was there ever a time when your wife, you're here talking to me, but was there ever a time when there was a knock on the door or a phone call about an injury or something with you?
Well, there was, I remember one time I chased a drug suspect over a barbed wire fence, and I cut a big hunk out of my arm and ended up having to go to the hospital and get, a tetanus shot, and it was all bandaged up. And I didn't say anything about it. I came home, my wife had already gone to work, and I was in bed, and she came home, at the end of the day, and, my arm is kind of hanging out with this big bandage on it. And it's kind of like, what happened to you? Kind of thing.
Here's your coffee and what?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's going on here and stuff like that. But I was lucky. I didn't, there were a few bumps and bruises and things like that, but all in all, I navigated it without really having too much of a problem.
And so now today, let's catch up with Terry today. What is
Terry today, I guess, probably started back in 2012.
Okay.
I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas. I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And being a coach, you're on your feet a lot. So initially, I didn't think much of it. But after a couple of weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. Okay. But he said, I'll send it off to pathology. 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. And as I said, he was a friend. So the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until he just kind of laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And I recommend you go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. So I did. Okay. And I had the bottom of my foot excised. I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then when I healed, my oncologist put me on a drug called interferon, as she said, to kind of kick the can down the road. We're just trying to buy you some time until there's more therapies for melanoma. The downside of interferon was that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week
every
for
week,
5 years.
and knowing that it's coming. And so not to, put you through something that was difficult again, but there are some things I'd like to talk about there if you don't mind.
No, not at
So
all.
I'm thinking with your friend, as your friend's trying to tell you this, that you're getting that intuitive hair on the back of your neck reaction, and how hard for your friend too. I mean, I think that's hard news for a doctor to deliver to anyone, but then it's like, this is my friend.
Right.
So during this time, were you able to continue your coaching duties? I'm guessing, yeah, I would have guessed no, but I wanted to ask. And if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about that process of beginning to recognize I'm not going to be coaching now? And maybe you can tell us a little bit what that was like and what was helpful for you, because this is one of these moments in a life that's the death of an idea or a way of being that's I perceive as more challenging than the change of being Terry the businessman to Terry the policeman, because you were embracing that change in a different way.
Yeah, it was something that I enjoyed. It was a lot of fun for me. And when I got diagnosed, my wife was actually looking at another job, and we live in Colorado now, and she ended up taking that job. So it was kind of like, well, MD Anderson, probably the best cancer hospital, maybe in the world, certainly probably in the United States. I know somebody would disagree with that, but it was just, all the resources were there, all the research was there, everything was there, and do we move? So it really wasn't so much, yes, I was going to miss the girls, and I actually had a couple of the girls that have moved to, they're women now, that have moved to Colorado, and I see them periodically and communicate with them. So I was really honestly more concerned with, am I going to live? Not so much as am I going to coach again, but am I going to live? Is this terminal? Is this, it's like, it's in my foot. It can't be that big of a deal, right? And I still remember this to the day when I had to go to MD Anderson. I remember sitting in a very sterile exam room, and a nurse came in. And she's like, okay, here's what's going to happen. And here's all the things that we're going to have to do to get you healthy and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. And then a nurse practitioner came in and told me the exact same thing. And then the surgeon came in and told me the exact same thing. And the entire time they're telling me about all the things they're going to have to do to try to save my life, I'm sitting on the exam table thinking, why is this paper here? The paper that's on the exam tables, the
yes, I do.
kind of paper.
It's annoying.
Why is this here? I'm like, oh my God, I was so not focused, and whether I didn't want to be or whether it was just so overwhelming. I understand why 3 people come in at 3 different times and tell you the same thing, because it's so overwhelming to deal with initially. Like I said, I'm sitting there wondering why this paper, is it sanitary? Does it absorb? I'm thinking all these goofy things, and I'm like, oh my God, Terry, pay attention. This is your life here in front of you.
I feel like what you're describing is possibly, I don't know for sure, but it seems like that, I bet you that is a kind of a normal experience, where you're going through, like someone tells you something and you hear them and you cognize it, but then there's so just so you know, as we're talking, I'm sitting here in my desk chair, barefoot and cross-legged, and I'm looking at my foot, and it's like, I don't know what my feet could be harboring right now, and so to go from that, I understand what you're saying, like that you're like, but this was a little thing in my foot, right. And then you're in this very serious scenario, and I would think that maybe fussing over that paper, which is super annoying, that paper on the would be maybe self-protectionism.
Yeah, right. Maybe it was. Maybe I don't want to deal with this, so I'll concentrate on the paper and not concentrate on what I should be concentrating on, from their perspective. And it was just very overwhelming. And I think I went through all the emotions of grief, the bargaining with God, I'm mad, I'm depressed, and then I just got to a point where it was like, okay, these are the cards that I've been dealt, not really crazy about them, but I have to play them, and I have to play them to the best of my ability. and I'm going to do that. And that, it was kind of a whole change, a whole pivot of, all right, I don't like this scenario, but I've got to deal with it. And, it's not going away. And so that's kind of when I was like, well, you know what, let's be positive about this and, find the silver lining in all this.
Okay. There's a phrase I use, actually, in the spirit of honesty. There's a phrase I overuse, and I'm going to do it now. So apologies to people who listen to me, because here I go again. But there's this phrase that this is how it is. So you got to that, this is how it is moment. Yeah, this is how it is. And I am in no way suggesting that it is an easy place to get to. Just because I overuse the phrase doesn't mean it's easy for me either. Right. But you got to that, this is how it is. What do you think helped? Was it the passing of time, people repeating things to you, prayer, contemplation, family support, any mix of the above? Like, what got you to your, this is how it is?
Yes.
I like that. Yes. Yes, Margaret.
all of the above. I talk a lot about, what I call my 3 F's, faith, family, and friends. And I've always had a very deep faith in God. And, I've been asked, we're great as Americans. We never want to take responsibility for our own success and happiness. Whenever, something doesn't go right, we want to find somebody or something to blame, so, people have asked me, well, who do you blame because you got cancer? And I'm like, who do I blame? I don't, well, do you blame God? I'm like, no. I started.
Why would I do that?
Yeah. I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker cancer today. I don't think that happened at all. Yeah. But I do feel that God has given me the strength to get through some pretty ugly times, because there were days, to be honest with you, Margaret, during that interferon, those 5 years of interferon treatments, where I prayed to die. I was just like, oh my God, I am so sick of being sick that just please take me out of this. Please, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. And, it's amazing what you can do when you have to, but
right.
So, so faith is very important. Family, like I said, it's just my wife and daughter. And when I had my leg amputated in 2020, my oncologist wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And, we were 8 years into this fight, and I looked at him like, is it going to save my life? And he's like, probably not, but it's going to buy you some more time. And I'm like, I'm not sure I want to do that, given that the outcome is going to be the same, but I'll go home and talk to my family. So I go home and I start talking to my wife and daughter, and my daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that. It's like, so we all sit around the kitchen table and we talk about how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I getting outvoted here for something I don't want to do? But I remembered back to the police academy when our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And we were to look at that photograph while we were learning to defend ourselves, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. And so I'm like, man, that just crystallized right there with me, and it was like, okay, I'm going to take chemotherapy now. And I'm glad I did, because it allowed me to be on this clinical trial drug now. And then finally, friends. I think you really find out who your friends are when you go through something like this. There were friends that I thought I was very close to that were like, ooh, cancer, nope, can't deal with this, don't want to deal with it, and kind of distance themselves. So it was faith, family, and friends really, I think, have gotten me through to this point so far in this journey.
The other day I was speaking with someone, and in a similar vein, I will say what he said is, we don't want to go through these things alone. So, we want to go, when we're going through any kind of loss or grief, we want to, in some way have some kind of a community or an outlet, and, your faith, family, and friends. And I can picture your daughter saying the family meeting. And even though, like you said, there's 3 of us, I think it's the idea of the formality of I picture her like getting her arms around the situation and like saying, like, this is serious, we need to talk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I sort of make a joke of it, but yes, it was a very serious conversation around that kitchen table. I don't want to do this, it means I'm probably going to die sooner. Are you guys okay with that? Are you good with that? Because I'm okay with it. I feel I found my purpose in life and lived it. So for me, death is not nearly as scary as I think for a lot of people that kind of casually go through their life and come to the end of it and be like, oh my God, I didn't do anything.
But they are not ready.
Yeah.
They are not ready. I guess I don't know if we are ever ready. What do you think? How do we help the people who love us become ready to say goodbye to us?
Yeah, I often think about that as a father. I taught my daughter how to live. Am I teaching her how to die now? And I hope it's with a certain amount of honesty, that when I was going to have my leg amputated and found out I had these tumors in my lungs, my wife and I actually went to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church and planned my funeral. And, I talk a lot about, motivation and being positive and keep moving forward. And so I got some brushback from people from that. They're like, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And I kind of looked at them like, well, last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now.
Exactly.
But it's not about the dying for me. It's about the living. I remember I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I just love. And it goes like this. It said, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I'm looking for.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking, I believe there's something on the other side of this life. So I always just feel that if you live your purpose, if you at least look for your purpose with an open heart, that when the end comes, it's not nearly as scary. Like I said, it's all those people that kind of live a casual life. And, as a result of that, their dreams, their goals, their desires, their purpose becomes a casualty of kind of that unplanned living. And then they get to the point where, and I've seen a number of people die, and as a policeman and certainly as a cancer patient, and I'm going to make a huge generalization right now, but I think the people who die, probably what you and I would call peaceful deaths, are those people that, found their purpose in life and lived it. Whereas the people who, kind of go kicking and screaming and want another, month or another year or whatever, those seem to be the people that never did anything with the life that God gave them. So I don't know if I think there's a correlation there. There is, at least for me. And I think for most people, there probably is.
I don't disagree with you. And, one of the topics I cover frequently is the idea of having the peaceful death. Because, although you and we are an interfaith discussion right now, which is beautiful. And so in Buddhism, we do talk about the peaceful death, so that for those who believe in rebirth, the idea is that with the peaceful death, you have a better rebirth, and to have a peaceful death means to have a peaceful life. And so I think you're right. I think if I am thrashing through everything, I'm likely to be thrashing at the end. And so it does come back to how we live.
Yeah, I think there's the important words of that saying that I gave you are, live your life. Live your life, live your life. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there and live it. And you do that, then death is not nearly as frightening as it appears to be to so many people.
And, I agree with you with what you're saying about, what you're teaching your daughter. If I may, I will just insert. So what my father, died with lung cancer, and he came from a background in Christianity. I'm the odd one out in the family with my choice. And he very much, because kind of the same thing, people would kind of, ask questions like, are you mad? Or, things like that. And a couple of things that he would say, he's like, well, first of all, we're all going to die, so he would say, and he would joke every once in a while, because when he was having some good times, like through the difficult times, sometimes he'd have a really good day and he'd be like, let's go take a road trip. And in that day, not to be a downer, but he would just every once in a while make a little joke and then say, hey, nobody gets out of this alive. And I feel like it was his reminder, like, I'm having a good day today, but the cancer is still here. And then the other thing that he would do is, he would say, I never ask why me. He's like, why not me?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to die. Many of us have cancer. And he was, we use the phrase life coach, but I realized in hindsight, he was being a death coach. And 2 years later, my husband got the same exact cancer. And so my dad's example was his example. Even if it's not the lesson you wanted to teach your daughter, you took on that role when you became a parent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we all want our lives to have meaning, to have purpose. And, I am on this clinical trial drug now that more than likely is not going to save my life. But the way I look at it is maybe it's going to save somebody's life, 5 years from now or 10 years from now with all the data that the doctors are taking from me, from blood work, from scans and things like that. So that to me, there's sort of that, have to or get to, when I go to treatment, do I get to go to treatment or do I have to go to treatment? And for me, it's I get to go to treatment, because when I go to treatment, they're gleaning data that may save somebody else's life, as opposed to, I have to go to practice today. I don't want to go to practice, that kind of thing. So for me, it's I get to go to treatment, no matter how ugly it is, no matter, how much I throw up and how lousy I feel, I still kind of remember this isn't about me. This is about something that's bigger than me. And
do you have any tips that you would give to some of us when we're having a have to day as opposed to a get to day?
Yeah, I have, I guess, what I've developed over these last almost 10 years now are what I call my 4 truths. And they're things that I've come to know, I've come to understand. I kind of look at them as sort of the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place to kind of build a life off of wherever you are in terms of building your life. And I'll give them to you there. I have them on a Post-it note here on my desk that I see multiple times every day. And they're just one sentence each. The first one is you need to control your mind or your mind is going to control you.
Okay.
The second one is we need to embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make us stronger and more determined individuals. The third one is more of a legacy truth, for lack of a better term. And it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. So I use those truths, to make decisions in my life. Like I said, I kind of was thinking about those, like, I don't think chemotherapy is something I want to do. Now, obviously, my mind got changed, but, I just think for me, they work. Certainly if they work for your audience, please feel free to use them. And if not, develop your own truths.
Terry, not only do they work, they really, in a very nice way, tie in with our four noble truths in Buddhism in a different way, because you may know them. I'll repeat them, which is that in life there is suffering. We suffer because we attach to things or we reject other things. There is a way out of suffering, and the way out of suffering is the Eightfold Noble Path, which I will summarize very quickly as in how you live. And so it just shows that, some of these different beliefs we have that we may have been raised with and taught that they were belonging to a certain group, they belong to all of us.
Yeah, they do. Our daughter's godmother is Buddhist. So, it was, and I remember my mom was kind of like, don't you think you should have a Christian? I'm like, why, Mom? We're going to raise her in a Christian household. Why can't she have a Buddhist godmother? There's nothing wrong with that. It's good for, and then the other funny thing is she went to a Jewish high school. So, she kind of got all kinds of different religious backgrounds and things like that, which I think make us more well-rounded individuals.
Isn't it? I think it's beautiful. And I think it's things like that that make it so easy for you and I to just say, yes, we're going to talk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've never been, when I was in college, I was the president my senior year of the Citadel Religious Council, which was nothing more than all the denominations on campus that, people could understand each other. I don't understand Islam. Teach me about that. I don't understand Catholicism. Teach me about that. And it was and I remember I had I was the president, there was a vice president, and they were elected positions. And I remember one time the vice president came to me and he's like, the next time the Jewish people want to do something, I want you to send them to me and I'm going to tell them why they're wrong in the Bible. I'm like, no, we're not doing that, Phil. That's not what it's about. It's not about being wrong.
That wasn't the point.
Yeah, you totally missed what we're doing here. So.
Show them where they're wrong in the Bible.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a minefield, right?
Because isn't it? Yeah.
I think with any of our religious texts, we can use them, I'll say skillfully, or we can weaponize them. And I believe that for any of our religious leaders and prophets, I feel like that wasn't the point.
Right. No, it wasn't.
The point.
It wasn't. It's all about love. It's not about hating each other.
Yeah. It's really good that you were there for that. Whew. Yeah, there could have been a riot on campus. We could have another story of the time when you stopped the riot on campus. Was there anything you wanted to share that we haven't had a chance to cover yet?
I guess as we're winding down, I'll leave you with a story. I've always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. My mom and dad used to let me stay up and watch, Gunsmoke and Wild Wild West and Bonanza and all that kind of stuff. 1993, the movie Tombstone came out. You may or may not have seen it. It starred Val Kilmer.
Many times.
Great movie. Val Kilmer is a man by the name of John Doc Holliday, and Kurt Russell by a man who played a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a card shark and a gunslinger. And Wyatt was a lawman his entire life. And these two men from entirely opposite backgrounds formed this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from my house. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with Doc, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this scene at the very end of the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc said, I was in love with my cousin when I was younger, but she joined a convent over the affair, but she's all that I ever wanted. And then he kind of looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Margaret, you and I know people out there that are just kind of sitting back and be like, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When that happens, I'll have a successful life. When this happens, I'll have a significant life. I guess what I would say is don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there and find the reason you were put on the face of this earth and live that. Because if you do, I'm going to promise you two things at the end of your life. One, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
That is beautiful, Terry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for living your life and being here on this earth. And thank you so much for sharing it with all of us.
Well, thank you for having me on. I always say it's good people like you that allow me to come on and tell my story. And between our conversation, hopefully we're going to make a difference in somebody's life. And if we do that, today's been a good day.
You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, margaretmeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.